This is James, and I'm here with the Oracle Outlook for the week starting April the 2nd, 2018. This week I wanted to work with the Cartomancer Poker Deck again, so that's a deck that I've chosen to assist me for this week's reading, and the Cartomancer Poker Deck is by Alain, Benoit. So I have the deck on hand. I'm going to take a few moments to shuffle the cards, and as I shuffle the cards, I'm focusing on my typical intention and question for these weekly general readings, and that is, what do we need to know for the week ahead? And I've been working with this card for my personal daily draws because I draw cards every day for myself. So I have found that sometimes the deck likes to be shuffled like this. So let's just do that a few times. All right. And now let's go ahead and cut the deck. And fan the cards out. And now I'm going to be looking for 5 cards to get my attention, because when I work with playing cards, I tend to do a line of 5 these days. So 3, card number 4, and card number 5. Okay. So now I'm putting the remainder of the deck to one side. All right. And so if you're no stranger to my videos, you know that when I work with a line of 5, I always look to the middle card first. For me, the middle card always represents the central issue or something that we're being asked to focus on going forward. So here we have the 8 of Hearts. Okay, so there's a couple of things that I want to say here as terms of possibilities. So the first possibility that I have with the 8 of Hearts is that this card can represent a loved one. So there may be some focus and attention on a loved one, because hearts as a suit for me represents feelings, emotions, and relationships. So there may be a situation that involves a loved one that is getting our focus and our attention this week. The other thing here about the 8 of Hearts for me is that this card can represent this idea of mutual love and admiration. So going again with the idea of a loved one, this could be a relationship in which there is mutual love and admiration for the parties involved. So there is that to consider too. On a spiritual sense, this card for me can represent one's guardian angel. So if you're into angels, then this could be saying too, like, there is a message from your guardian angel, and this usually goes hand in hand. Whenever I look at this card as a guardian angel card, then the message always is that your guardian angel wants you to know that you are watched over and that you are protected. So there is that to consider. If you're not into angels, then it could just be a matter of you being in a space, an emotional space, or even in the context of a particular relationship in which you have a feeling that you are being protected, that the other person that you are in relationship with is watching out for you, you know, kind of has your back kind of thing. So I'm looking at the image on the card, and this card is called Instinct. And so for me, this card can represent trusting your instinct, going with your gut kind of thing. So it could just be a matter of whatever it is that you'll be experiencing this week, your intuition works on on the level of your feelings and your emotions. So it's about like trusting your feelings, trusting your gut, trusting your instincts, right? The only other thing, and this may be more of a spiritual sense, so maybe if you're not into angels per se, then sometimes this card could be exploring like ancestral wisdom. I'm looking at the image, and for me, I'm looking at the figure wearing what looks to be like a mask that's on a totem pole, you know, kind of thing. So it could just be a matter of like this idea about ancestors, ancestry, things of that nature. So somebody may be exploring either in the literal sense, they're exploring who they are and where they come from in terms of their ancestry, or in a more spiritual sense, like they're exploring like a relationship with their ancestors, right? And becoming more aware of that kind of thing. So that is how I would look at the 8 of Hearts. So now taking a look at the surrounding cards, because for me the surrounding cards could offer us more information about that. Starting with the card on the far left. No mistakes how this goes. Okay, so here we have the 4 of Diamonds as the first card. So again, a number of possibilities here. My first go-to association with the Four of Diamonds is about, this idea about financial stability and financial security. So this idea about working towards that, or putting some energy into that, because diamonds represents energy, right? So if it's not about this idea of actual financial security and stability, putting energy into the sense of like what would have to happen in your life, or what would you need to have in terms of material resources that would allow you a greater sense of stability and security in your life, right? So there is that to consider. That's my first go-to. If I stick with the idea that this card can represent money to some degree, then this card is also about financial accounts. So this could be financial accounts of any kind, right? So this could be checking account, savings account, retirement account, anything having to do with putting money into some kind of account, right? So there is that. So somebody may be working on this idea of like financial security and stability would, be in a literal sense of having money in the bank, right? And maybe laying a foundation, or opening an account that would allow you to begin the stages of that process of stability and security, right? So there is that. Now, interestingly enough, I had talked about with the Eight of Hearts being this idea about ancestral wisdom, right, or working with ancestors. This card is known as family, and it has the image of a house on it, right? So for me, this again coincides with this idea of like somebody may be exploring their sense of ancestry. That could be about family history, their foundation, how was their family, what was their family history built on, kind of thing, because Four is a foundation number, foundation, right? So there could be saying too, like somebody is actively working on becoming more aware of their history, their ancestry, their lineage, that kind of thing, right? Because of the value that that information would give them, right? So there is that to consider. The other thing about this card being family, it could also be about, in the spiritual sense, maybe in the spiritual sense, this idea about belonging. Because sometimes this card can come up to reinforce this idea like we all belong, we all have this need to belong, right? So somebody may be exploring this idea of family, and family could be the family that you were born into, or the family that you choose. Family, we are born into a family up to some point, and then we go out into the world and we choose people to create family with, right? So it could be the family of origin or family that you choose, right? But each one is designed to create this sense of belonging, right? So somebody may be on this search to create a greater sense of belonging, and that may be through the activity of looking through their genealogy, their ancestry, their lineage, that kind of thing. So that's how I would look at the Four of Diamonds. Now let's take a look at the card in between. And here we have, okay, no mistake how these things go. Okay, so here we have the Two of Diamonds, right? So now we have a diamond followed by another diamond. And so for me, two diamonds back to back can represent this idea about improved success. So there may be something that a person's embarking on, and their likelihood of being successful at it has now just compounded itself, right? So there is that. I want to just point out. Now, diamonds again being money, this card, when I see the Two of Diamonds in between two other cards, this can represent financial help or financial assistance, right? And so this card would suggest it could be either financial help that's being given or received. When it's in the middle, it could go either way, right? So there is this idea about financial help or assistance, right? For me, this represents a financial exchange even. So it could just be saying too, like money is changing hands. And that would make sense if we go with the idea that the Four of Diamonds represents a financial account, right? So here's a possibility that's coming out for me in the three cards immediately right off the bat. If we read it from left to right as a story, we may be taking money out of a financial account to help a loved one who may be in some sort of financial assistance, right, kind of thing. So I'm seeing that as a possible literal scenario. Somebody may be actively thinking about helping somebody out financially, and in order to do that, you might have to take the money out of an account. But it's not for yourself. You're doing it to help a loved one, somebody that you have a sense of love and admiration for, if I can get the words out, because remember the Eight of Hearts was about mutual love and admiration. So there is that to consider as a literal scenario for someone, right? So that is the 2 of diamonds. The only other thing that I would offer about the 2 of diamonds, and so sometimes another thing that can happen is that, and again, this is very literal, very mundane, is that sometimes the 2 of diamonds can represent this idea about an invitation to go out to lunch or dinner. So it could just be saying too, like with a family thing, somebody may be planning to take a family member or family members out to lunch and dinner. And it's kind of just a way to show appreciation for that person in particular or those people as a collective, right? So there is that to consider with the 2 of diamonds. But my first go-to is that this card can come up to indicate financial help or some sort of financial exchange. So now let's take a look at the card on the other side of the 8 of hearts. And here we have, there is a theme going on here. So here we have the 4 of hearts. Okay, so now we had 2 diamonds and we have 2 hearts, right? If we go with the ordering of the cards. So for me, this is a week with the 4 cards on the table where we are moving through experiences which we get to have some sense of emotional rewards, because that's how I would read the combination of diamonds and hearts. Emotional rewards, or that we are investing our time and energy into our relationships with other people this week, right? So one of the things with the 4 of hearts, the 4 of hearts for me is known as the marriage bed card. So a couple of things could be saying too, like that loved one that we were talking about, maybe for someone, a spouse, literal marriage partner, right? If it's not, then this could just be a person that we are getting closer to. You know, we are becoming more intimately connected to. That is how I would look at the 4 of hearts. But for me, this usually represents a relationship being formed. And we have 2 4s, by the way. So 4 is a number of foundation, but it's also a number of formation, right? So we have a relationship that's being formed. And as it's being formed, it also is creating the space and the energy for it to become deeper, right? So there is that to consider. Now, the very interesting thing about this card is that this card is known as creativity, and I'm looking at the image, and there is a person who is an artist on the card, right? She is actually engaged in the process of, you know, painting a picture. So this could be literally somebody may be an actual artist, and so you could be falling more in love with the idea of your art, your craft, you know, that kind of thing. Maybe the person that you have mutual love and admiration for is an artist, you know, that kind of thing. That's just a literal, I'm just going with the picture. The other thing here could be a matter of, if it's not about you being an artist in the literal sense, then sometimes this card for me is about like exploring your creativity and how can you be creative in your approach to situations this week. So now, since we talked about 2 hearts back to back, and hearts represents feelings, emotions, and relationships, that could just be saying too, like maybe you're being asked to be more creative in terms of how you approach your relationships to other people this week, right? So there is that to consider with the 4 of hearts. And now taking a look at the last card in the line this week, we have, okay, so we have a card that's breaking the mold here. So here we have the Jack of Clubs. So now the suit of clubs for me represents work and business. So the first thing I want to say, if it's not about work and business, and it's very interesting, I talked about with the 4 of hearts coming before it, that, you know, this idea about somebody being an artist, you know, or maybe even a creative person. So it could be saying too, like there may be something having to do with that as an actual business or somebody's actual work. You know, somebody is an actual creative person, right? So there may be something having to do with that and putting some more effort into that, because clubs for me represents work in the metaphorical sense, implying effort. So somebody may be needing to put some effort into that. Again, coming after our hearts, it could be saying to putting some effort into one's relationships, especially one's intimate and close relationships this week, going with the 4 of hearts coming before that. You know, but it's also about, you know, the effort that we put into a situation, seeing some progress made as a result of that. You know, so I'm seeing this like the effort and energy that we put into a situation, we see some progress being made as a result, right? So there is that to consider as a suit of clubs, right? The only other thing, if I can get the words out, the only other thing that I would talk about here in terms of relationships, when clubs comes up, this represents this idea about being social. So it could just be a matter of, again, this idea about being social, being involved in social activity with either people that we are close to or that people that we are considering forming closer bonds with. You know, it's about like, and the way we get to do that would be through some form of social activity. And that reminds me of what I talked about with the Two of Diamonds, this idea about maybe taking people out to lunch or dinner, or maybe you being on the receiving end of, you know, a lunch invitation or a dinner invitation. You know, this idea like breaking bread with people, that is a great way to form a closer bond or a closer connection with people, is over food, right? That kind of thing. So I'm seeing that. And specifically going with that, then the Jack would represent somebody who's younger, right? So this could be, you know, a younger person in particular that we are wanting to form a closer bond or connection with for whatever reason, right? So there is that to consider with the Jack of Clubs. Another thing here could be about news or messages that pertain to business or pertain to some sort of social activity, social event. So again, that would reinforce this idea of maybe hearing news or receiving news about a possible invite somewhere and considering whether you're going to go or not. You know, it could also be about thoughts about, you know, work or business and wanting to see that business or that work progress. You know, those are all aspects of the Jack of Clubs for me. But at the end, it could just represent this idea of, you know, whatever the energy, going with the diamonds, that we put into a situation, we see some progression or some progress being made as a result. Now I'm looking at the image, and I'm looking at the fact that the figure on the card looks like an altar boy. So it could just be a matter of, I'm playing with the idea of altar, and altar for me can represent this idea of maybe altering something or changing something. So what in your life would need to be altered, maybe in order to create space for particular people and particular relationships? Would you be willing to do that? You know, this kind of thing. It could also be too from a place where we talked about this idea about ancestral wisdom, because that just came back to me as a focus. Then this could be saying too, like somebody is actually engaging and creating an altar, like a sacred space to spend time with one's ancestors, right? And that would make sense because I'm looking at the altar boy holding a lamp or a lantern, and for me that represents this idea about enlightenment, you know, this about wisdom. I tend to look at this card as like the hermit card, because the hermit holds up a lamp. So this idea about enlightenment, you know, wisdom being gained, you know, this idea of contemplation, things of that nature. That would be all ways of creating space to spend time with your ancestors, because I don't want to leave that out, because that was one of the messages I got at the beginning, and that would be a nice way to end. So somebody may be making energy or progress in their relationship with their ancestors, and one of the ways that they're going to do that is to create sacred space in that effort, right? So that's how I would look at that. And on that note, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this week's Oracle Outlook. I'm James Himm Mitchell, and as I close, I'd like to thank you for sharing space here with me, sacred space here with me for this week's reading, and I look forward to sharing the same sacred space with you again in our next video reading together. So until then, I'm hoping that you have a wonderful day, and I'm hoping that you have a wonderful week. Take care.